Makadini Salwanani. Welcome to this video where we're going to look at how to cook Sadza or Isitshwala as you know it. So we are going to look at the process. Initially wanted to make it a video with another segment on safety, health, the fourth industrial revolution, technology in cooking, and also food and nutrition, where we look at the chemistry and the biology of it. So that will be coming in part 2. So this is part 1, where we're going to look at how to prepare the sadza itself. Then we'll look at the benefits and the like in the part 2. So let's move on to the quote that we are going to focus on in this video, just to get us into the mood of cooking. Firstly, we're going to look at this quote by Mai Chisamba. She's a popular show host in Zimbabwe, TV show host, and we are going to look at how best, maybe it's an idea actually, on how we can improve the process of cooking sadza, as well as incorporating inventions and modern technology and other types of improvements that we can put into place to make it easier to cook. So firstly, she asked by posing the question, but where is the sadza cooker? She was on the Vikendi show, those who know it in Zimbabwe, and they were discussing these things. So it's basically about culture. We need to embrace our culture, which is one of the mantras of Shumbafoot. And we see that she's posing this question to say, where is the sadza cooker? Because we have the rice cooker and all these other machines used to quicken the process of cooking, and also to reduce or remove human error in the process of cooking. So that's why she was asking this question, and it's a very good question, because we need people who are able to make these machines or these robots or these appliances, whatever you call them. So at the black highlighted part, which is highlighted in black and written in brown, we see that she is now describing one way in which, or one idea that someone can implement in creating this sadza cooker, where you can have a button where you just press and it does every process, and you have to set the time maybe as you are pressing the buttons. Just like with the microwave oven, you can have buttons to press and you can set the time. So maybe when it's now boiling, or when you're now mixing and the like, you need to set the time, the normal duration for it to simmer, to boil, and also just for it to settle. Then we also see that she's saying these things need to be implemented whilst you are chilling, or that's slang for just saying when you're relaxed. So let's suppose you're just relaxed and it's doing all the business, which means that you won't have to put in a lot of work. So it kind of promotes some kind of laziness, but it's beneficial in the situations where you're cooking for a lot of people. Because yeah, trust me, when you have to cook in a bigger pot, yeah, the process of mixing is going to be tough, very tough. It requires a lot of effort, as you're going to see as we look into the process. So let's now move on to what we need in this activity. Okay, so what you need is, you need a pot, you need a lid, a pot with a lid, because there are times when you need to cover and trap the steam and the heat within the pot. So you need that lid. But in the case when you're using traditional clay pots, like for example the tamba kodzi that is used to cook sadza, that tamba kodzi is a Shona name. There are other names that you can have in other languages, so you can just translate. But that clay pot has a wider opening at the top. It's different from the other clay pots which have a narrow neck. That one is a wider one, so that you can mix well and for other purposes. And then you have a flat cooking spoon, which we call mugoti in Shona. And then you have a small bowl, which we are going to use to make the paste. You're going to see the paste later, but we have an equivalent which is called mbia. It's part of the clay traditional plates, small bowl like. It is used to serve the side dish or the side food that you use when you're eating together with the sadza, like the soup or the vegetables or the gravy or whatever thing that you have at the side, including the meat. And then we have a jug as well that we're going to use, one for cold water and one for hot water. Like you're seeing in the ingredients, we have lukewarm water, not very cold, just lukewarm, and hot water as well. And then we'll need the the flour basically, or the mealie meal, or you can have something similar to that flour of any um, uh, the grains that contain the carbohydrates that we need for this kind of food. So you need that um, ingredient. And then some people who add fresh milk, butter, or cheese and other additives, but it's good to just eat it like that. Sometimes when you try and add more things, you might destroy the taste. You might change the taste for the worst. But those are preferences of individuals. Just a few people do that, but most people, they just eat it together with their soup or their vegetables. Those are the ones that will give the flavor. But some people just like the sadza itself with the flavor. But normally the fresh milk butter and the butter, it's also margarine for those who may be wondering. So usually these ones are put into the porridge, the one that's not thick. Yes, that porridge that's a bit watery, that's the one you use. It's usually eaten in the morning, like a cereal, the way you eat your porridge in the morning. Yes, so that's where you then add because you have nothing else to eat the porridge with. Some even add peanut butter as well. So those are just personal preferences of various individuals, but basically the sadza itself, it's fine. Alright, so first of all, you're going to need to turn on the stove, or to start the fire. Maybe you're using firewood, and you have some stones that are going to support the pot on top of the firewood, which we call mapiwa. And you find that the pot can be put on the stove or on the heat. Let's just say heat, because we have different sources of heat. So you just start the source of heat, you ignite the fire, then you put the pot on the heat, so that at least it starts receiving the heat. You're going to look at heat transfer later on in this video. So when you put that pot on the heat, don't think that it's going to take long to be there, because the process which is going to precede the boiling stage, it doesn't take a long time. So you would have mixed whatever you need to mix, and you can just add it into the pot. It doesn't take a long time, so don't worry about the pot then starting to become very hot. And when you add the stuff, then you know what happens. The moment liquids come into contact with heat, they quickly evaporate, especially when the heat is having the temperature of the boiling point of that liquid. It instantaneously evaporates. So don't worry about that. It won't take long for you to add the contents into the pot. So that's the first thing. And make sure the heat is also medium. I don't know how you adjust your firewood so that it doesn't become very hot, but yeah, you just need medium heat. If you put a lot of heat, you increase the temperature to boiling point, which is not the desired outcome. Right after you add the paste that we're going to look at, you need some time for it to properly boil and for the convection currents to happen before the eruption starts, or before the evaporation then happens. So we'll look at that later on, but let's move on to the mixing of the paste, or the preparation of the paste, from stage 2. Okay, so this stage, you now add the flour into the bowl. So you have a bowl, you put it on a table, and then you just add your flour, or hufu, or mealie meal. Yes. So this flour, or this mealie meal, let's call it mealie meal for now, although we are saying flour because we have a variety of other alternatives to mealie meal, which can be used to make the sadza, or Isitshwala, or pap, or ugali, depending on where you come from. So yes, I was saying add into the bowl, and then you have to mix. So it's like with the cornstarch. Those who have made cornstarch, we have never made sadza, but if you use cornstarch, you first have to mix the paste, cornstarch and cold water, and then you add it to the pot where you're cooking your food. So that's the same idea that's here. Why? Because you're trying to prevent the creation of lumps. Yes, because there are lumps that will be created, so you need to crush them first, or you need to prevent them from taking place, from developing in your paste, so that your sadza does not end up with lumps. Right, then this third stage, we are going to add the tepid water, which is basically lukewarm water. well, you can add cold water as well. There's no harm in doing that, but you don't want the process to then take long when you're now adding hot water and the water has to now rise to boiling point and the like. So you stir the mixture with the mugoti that we're talking about, the flat cooking spoon, and that will be to prevent lumps, which you call mapundu in Shona. So that's basically the idea I was talking about. So you stir so that the consistency is maintained, and that will prevent the creation of the lumps. And also, if any lumps then are created, you then have to crush them at this stage before you apply into the pot. There is another stage where you're going to have to crush them if they happen to be created inside the sadza. So that stage will then be a bit more difficult for you to do that. And make sure this paste is not too watery as well. Yes, that's another point. Don't add a lot of water, just make it balanced. You see, it should be like a paste. The water should not be a lot. Yes, so that's another thing. And don't worry about the sinking of the porridge or the paste. Yeah, it just happens because it's a bit heavier. What you don't want is for those lumps, the dry lumps with the dry core or dry insides to take place, because yeah, usually that's not comfortable to chew or to eat. Many people will complain about those lumps when they're eating sadza with lumps, so make sure you avoid that. Alright, now you then have to pour the mixture into the pot. Yeah, I think that's basically it for this part, just pouring in, and also then you have to mix. So that's another stage that we're going to look at after this. So just pour the mixture into the pot and wait for, alright, you don't have to wait for any time. After this stage you then move on to the next stage. Alright, so now you have to add hot water to the mixture that you put into the pot, or that you poured into the pot. As you are adding the hot water, also simultaneously stir with the cooking spoon so that you maintain the consistency of the mixture and the water. And you're not also supposed to then add a lot of hot water. The reason why we're adding more hot water is because, or rather we're adding hot water because we didn't have hot water in the beginning, but we're adding it so that we quicken the process of the increase in temperature until we reach the boiling point. Or we are trying to make the process faster, you get. So remember that invention of the Sadza cooker, maybe that would then help with increasing the time in which the water or the contents will become hot, or it will increase the process of mixing and maintaining the consistency as well. Hot water is being added, or we might not even need to add the hot water. There could be another mechanism that will enable the contents to become hot faster. So those are inventions that need to be done. Finding out how the heat transfer is going to take place, as we're going to look as we're going to discuss just after this stage. So for heat transfer when you're cooking, we have the radiation. The radiation we are talking about is the heat that goes outwards from the source. So there is no contact between the source of heat and the pot. So the heat just passes through air, or it passes through the space that is there between the two objects and then reaches the other object. Or it might even go and spread outwards, so into other spaces around. So it doesn't just radiate towards the other object, but it can go outwards. It freely radiates the heat outwards, the source of heat. And then we have the convection currents. Now with the convection currents, we're talking of the motion of the molecules, or the movement of the molecules from the base up and back down to the base. So from the base, we are saying that heat has been radiated. It's now at the base of the pot, and the base of the pot then transfers heat to the contents. So since the contents have liquids, but we are saying that it's not entirely liquid, there is also the porridge that is there. So the porridge, it moves, but it's not that efficient, or it's not as fast as with liquids. So with the molecules of water, because they have reached their boiling point, and the molecules of starch have not reached their point of thermal decomposition, we find that the water molecules will then try and influence the particles of the millimole to move together with them, but that won't happen. It's only the steam that will manage to move and create its spaces because of the expansion of air within the pot. So that's why you find that the heat, the steam rather, it comes out as if there are bubbles that are popping at the top, yes, from the bottom. So you may be wondering where that air is coming from. It's actually the separation of particles. With this boiling point, we're talking of the breaking of bonds. There's some bonds that are holding the water together. We have, for example, the OH bonds. They have attractions. They attract each other. Yes, if you know the chemistry behind it. We have those dipole, van der Waals forces and the like. Yeah, those type of things that happen to enable particles to be attracted to each other. So those will then be defeated, basically, forced by the heat to separate, or by the thermal energy. So there's energy differences that will take place, which will enable the defeat of the bonds, or the breaking of the bonds, or the breaking of the forces that join the particles together. And that will then create those air spaces, and they move up. So the steam is forced to move up because hot air or heat, it moves up. So the steam will then move up, but it's moving up to a place where there is low thermal energy, so low heat, or there is no heat at all. The higher you go, the cooler it becomes. But yeah, we are not saying that's the case. But we have heat at the base of the pot, so at the top there is less heat. So considering that there is less heat there, whatever that's cool or whatever that is a low temperature will drop, and higher temperature will rise. Yes, the coincidence. Low temperature dropping, high temperature rising. Yeah, the coincidence. But that's what happens. So whatever at the top will then drop, and then as it's heated, it then expands and also rises up. Then you also see that as that is happening, we also have the weight of the porridge itself. It's going to then force the porridge to sink. There's also the settlement that will have to take place. So that's why we are emphasizing on mixing the porridge, so that we don't have to burn the porridge, because the moment it sinks, steam is forced to rise, and the water that is making that porridge what it is, or millimole into porridge, is then forced to rise, or it is then forced to turn into steam, which will rise, and whatever will be left will then have to undergo thermal decomposition, and that's when we then have the burning that will happen. Pesra the makoko acho aita matsito. You see, you now have burnt the porridge, and because the water is escaped, so you need to maintain that consistency, so that whatever is affected is just the water and the steam, and that the porridge is still intact. It's still okay to eat. It's not burnt. So enough of that, and then we move on to, so the steam, as you can see, those are the arrows that are bending that are at the top there. It's already labeled there. And then what else? So this can happen during the simmering stage, also when kukwata as well. So kukwata ni kushinyira, I think in English it's just basically simmering, both cases, because you're just leaving it to simmer, as you're going to see. So that's the case. And then we have what we call, so that's convection currents and radiation. We're done with that. Then we move on to the last part, which is the conduction. So with conduction, we're going to look at it more, or going to focus more on the impact of that when we're focusing on the safety and stuff, and the safety precautions that need to be taken into account on cooking sadza. That's in the next part, or the next episode. So wait for that one to come. For now, you just need to know that from the pot to the handle, there is contact. With the radiation, there's no contact. There's space, which allows it to move. Heat does not need objects to be together in order for it to be radiated. That's why we're calling it radiation. It's free passage without objects being attached. So that's the case with the handle and the main pot. The main pot is the one that transfers heat to the handle. So that's why we emphasize also on wearing gloves, maybe oven mittens as well, and also having to insulate the handle so that it won't affect you. Let's suppose you forget to wear a glove. At least you won't be affected. You won't get your hands burnt, or your palm burnt, or your fingers burnt. At least you'll be able to hold the pot firmly when need be, as you're going to see later on. So I think that's basically the idea of heat transfer. yeah, I need not to explain much on this one, but all you need to know is that we also use metal because it's a good heat conductor. I think that would be the last point. So which means thermal insulation might need maybe plastic or wood coating on the handle so that you won't get to be affected by the heat. Let's move on. Right, so after the mixing of the contents that are there, maybe it is when it has reached the boiling point, the contents after adding the hot water and mixing, you then close the pot when it reaches that boiling point. So you start seeing the bubbles coming out. I think you've seen from the heat transfer, there's some illustration that's there. So you can just refer to that. So you'll see that happening, the bubbles, the steam that's trying to escape from the porridge. Yes, so that's why you have those bubbles. Then you know it's boiling. Then you leave it to simmer, which we call kukwata, this stage, for the time that you see best. But normally it's like 10 to 15 minutes, not a long time. So you just leave the pot there and then let it do its business. Right, and then we move on to the mixing part, which is one of the, or rather the most labor intensive part of this cooking process. So we call it kumona in Shona. So you have to hold the handle firmly. That's why I was saying, because by the time it's simmering, heat is being transferred to the handle. So by the time you then want to then hold the handle, after it was simmering, after it was just stationed on the stove or on the source of heat, maybe it's the fire, you get your hands burnt. So you need something to then hold the handle with. But some people are used to the heat that is transferred to the handle. So yeah, if it's a metal pot, they just do that. And also, just to also add on to the heat transfer stuff, black is also good at conducting heat. That's why you find that most people who use such pots, they use black pots. Yes, it's because it's a very good conductor of heat. And if you're going to be cooking on with firewood, the ashes will not stay in the pot as much as with maybe silver, maybe you have cast iron or aluminium, or especially with, for example, the aluminium. It's very shiny. It's not dark. It's not dull. So of course you're going to see the black ash and the like. Yeah, the burnt carbon. For those who don't know why it's black, there's some carbon involved there. That's some other chemistry to look into. But that's basically the idea. You also need to understand that black absorbs heat more than white and other bright colors. It has to be black and dull. And then what we're talking about is the kumona part. So you need to mix the sadza. So it's like you are pushing the sadza against the walls of the pot. Yes. So you need to hold the handle firmly because you might remove the pot off the source of heat and burn yourself. So you need to do that very careful. You have to be very careful about it. And then the pot has to be directly onto the source of heat so that there is consistency in heat transfer. And also so that one part of the pot does not lose heat. There's equal distribution of heat basically on the other side of the pot. And I think that's basically this stage. Oh, and also if you want to add more meal so that it becomes thicker, that's up to you, depending on how you want your sadza to be in terms of thickness. So some people like it, call it dete. It's not very thick, but it's thick enough to not stick on your fingers. But some people love it they call it chidina. Chidina is like a brick, so they want it to be very firm and very thick. Yeah, so that they fill their stomachs. But that's another issue. We will not look into that. Maybe when we look into part 2, that's when we'll discuss that. But here we're just looking at the process of cooking. So that's now the process of mixing and trying to maintain the consistency. Oh yeah, and one thing, don't forget that the heat has to be lowered. You have to lower the heat when you're now doing the mixing kumona part, because you might burn the bottom part of the sadza. So like I was saying, as you can see in the images that are in front of you on this diagram. So as I was saying, that some of the sadza is going to sink to the bottom. When it loses water, it's going to start to thermally decompose. So that's the breaking of the bones and the like, and eventually the stuff, the meal starts burning. So you need to avoid that by constantly mixing. But you find that if you also leave the pot for a long time, it will start burning, as you can see. So to avoid that, You also have to lower the time that you leave it on the source of heat so that it doesn't burn. And some people actually like eating this part of the sadza. It's called goko or makoko. Yes, it's basically like crust, which is a bit crispy when it hardens. After maybe you have removed the sadza, and you leave it to cool down, it hardens, so it will be like crispy, and you can. It to them it tastes nice. I haven't tasted it, but so I heard it's nice. So I don't know. You might want to experiment and also eat it, but some people really enjoy this makoko. So this is bound to take place. So don't be worried when you then see that there is this layer that develops at the bottom. It's bound to happen because of that issue that I was talking about. The porridge is heavier than the water, so eventually it's just going to sink to the bottom. But when you mix and attain thickness at the boiling point, where the first the first simmering stage, you would have made sure that there is consistency enough to ensure that the whole of the sadza doesn't sink to the bottom. So that's what we're trying to achieve. So when we are doing these things, like when you are preparing something or when you are manufacturing, for example, I'll give an example of manufacturing. Your input, the amount of the things that you put in your input might not come out exactly as 100% output. So that's why we then talk of efficiency of the system. Does the output match the input? And also the percentage yield of what we have produced. All those things you can calculate that, but we are trying to say you don't get 100% of the output that you desire. So you wanted sadza, but you now have a certain percentage that has become makoko, the crust. So yeah, it's undesired, but turns out some people enjoy it as well. So let's move on to the next stage. Now at that low heat, you need to leave the pot again to simmer, but this stage we don't call it kukwata in Shona, but we now call it kushinyira. Yes, as it is written there. So that's now that stage where we're now just making sure that everything cooks well and that the heat reaches all the places in the pot, reaches the entire contents, and then yeah, making sure that our sadza settles well. That's the main cooking part, and it has to happen for less than 10 minutes. If you exceed, you might start seeing those brown the evidence of the brown parts of the crust at the bottom. So it would have stayed for a long time. But if you don't make it stay for a long time, yeah, you just see the consistency in the color together with the sadza. But we also have to ensure that the sadza doesn't burn. That's in the next video. So we'll look at maybe other ways we can try and avoid that, especially for people who have certain disabilities as well. They need to be factored into such solutions. So we'll look into that. Now we have reached the final stage where you just mix the sadza and you then serve whilst it's still hot. You don't want to eat it when it's cold. You won't be able to eat it. It won't be enjoyable. But serve whilst it's still hot. And for those who are not good with molding the sadza with their hands when it's hot, yeah, you might as well practice. Some of us were now experts at doing that, and yeah, we're used to holding the sadza straight from the plate without using any forks and knives and other cutlery. So yes, that's the final stage. I need not to explain a lot except to say that yeah, we have a beautiful image behind there in the background showing some of the things that are involved when cooking the sadza. So, and also other preparation of other things using mill, like for example a certain beverage that we're going to look at in the next video. So we have a couple of things we're going to look at in the next video, but it's not going to be long, not as long as this one, I guess. It's just going to cover a lot of things, but it's going to be very informative and you're going to like it. You're going to know something more about the science behind sadza and you're gonna love it. So make sure you get to watch that video. It will come after this one, and I hope you enjoy what I have shared with you. So yeah, basically this is how you make your sadza. So yeah, go on, prepare the sadza or save the sadza if you are making together with me in this video, and yeah, enjoy. I wish I knew